The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving behind an orange glow that bathed the swamp in an eerie light. Ethan, a seasoned explorer, found himself standing at the edge of the thick, mist-covered marshlands. He had been tracking unusual readings for days, reports of strange creatures and unknown energy sources. This was his mission, to uncover the truth behind these anomalies. But the swamp, with its dense fog and twisting vines, was unlike anything he had encountered before. He glanced at his equipment one last time. His scanner, his map, and his communicator, all tucked safely in his backpack. With a deep breath, he stepped forward into the swamp. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of wet earth and decaying plants. The silence around him was suffocating, interrupted only by the occasional croak of distant frogs or the flutter of unseen wings above. As he ventured deeper into the swamp, the ground beneath him grew softer, each step making a faint squelching sound. The path ahead seemed to disappear into an endless maze of trees, vines, and murky water. Ethan's boots sank into the soft mud with every step, but he pushed forward, determined to find the source of the strange readings that had drawn him here. Minutes turned into hours, yet the swamp felt timeless, its thick vegetation blocking any sense of direction. The air grew cooler, and the further Ethan walked, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. He could feel it. Something was watching him, waiting. It wasn't just the rustling of leaves or the distant growls that unnerved him. It was a presence, something more powerful, something alive. And then, just as he thought he might be losing his bearings, he saw it. Through the mist and the trees, a figure appeared. At first, it was just a shadow, a silhouette that seemed to blend into the swamp's surroundings. But as it stepped closer, the outline became clearer. It was a woman, or at least it looked like one. But there was something distinctly alien about her. Her skin, a pale blue that almost shimmered under the fading light, contrasted sharply with the green and brown hues of the swamp. Her long, dark hair cascaded down her back, blending with the shadows, and her ears were pointed, more like an elf's than a human's. Ethan stood frozen, not sure if he was seeing things or if the isolation of the swamp was beginning to affect his mind. But this was no hallucination. She was real. The creature moved with grace, her body lithe and powerful, as though she was one with the swamp. Her eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, met his gaze. There was no fear in her eyes, only curiosity and something else, something wild, untamed. She did not speak, not a word. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if assessing him, and then began to move closer. Ethan took a cautious step back, unsure of how to react. His hand instinctively reached for his scanner, but before he could activate it, the woman, Beastwoman, whatever she was, stopped just a few feet away. Her gaze was piercing, almost as if she could see right through him. She didn't speak, but her presence was overwhelming, and he could feel the weight of her gaze, steady and unblinking. He swallowed hard, trying to muster the courage to speak. Who are you?" His voice felt strange in the thick silence of the swamp. But the woman didn't respond. She simply studied him with those glowing eyes, her expression unreadable. Ethan could feel the tension building, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Should he try to communicate with her? Should he run? As if reading his thoughts, she took a small step forward, her movements swift and precise, like a predator closing in on its prey. Ethan's heart raced, but he didn't move. There was something about her that kept him rooted to the spot, as if some invisible force was holding him in place. And then, just as quickly as she had appeared, the woman turned and began walking away, disappearing back into the thick mist of the swamp. Ethan stood there, staring after her, his mind racing. What had just happened? Was she a native of the swamp? A creature from another world? He had no answers, only questions. Shaken, but still determined, he made his way deeper into the swamp. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was still there, somewhere, watching him from the shadows. As the minutes passed, Ethan felt more and more uneasy. The swamp had grown colder, and the once calming sounds of the wildlife had died away, replaced by an unsettling stillness. His scanner buzzed faintly in his pocket, the only indication that he was still on track to find what he had come for. But now, the thought of continuing his journey seemed less important than understanding the strange woman who had crossed his path. Why had she appeared? What was her purpose? And more importantly, why had she been so determined to keep him from leaving? Ethan pressed on, his eyes scanning the darkness, waiting for the next encounter. But the woman, the alien Beastwoman, had already made one thing clear: she wasn't going to let him leave easily. Ethan's heart raced as he continued through the swamp, each step more hesitant than the last. The mist seemed to thicken, swirling around him in eerie patterns, and every now and then he could swear he heard something. Footsteps, faint rustling, the distant snap of a twig breaking underfoot. The strange alien woman's face lingered in his mind. He couldn't shake the memory of her glowing eyes and the calm, yet predatory way she moved. He had to find out who or what she was. There was no way he was leaving without answers. He pulled his map from his backpack, trying to make sense of his surroundings, but the fog made it difficult to get a clear sense of direction. His scanner gave an occasional beep, but it was nothing that could help him with this alien mystery. As he trudged forward, his eyes darting from side to side, he saw a shadow shift in the distance. Ethan froze, his muscles tensing. He wasn't sure what it was, but his instincts told him that it was her, the alien Beastwoman. She was watching him again, waiting for him to make a move. With his breath held, Ethan cautiously stepped toward the source of the movement. There was no sound except for his own footfalls, and yet the air around him seemed charged, as if the swamp itself was holding its breath. A sudden noise, like a rustle of leaves, broke the silence, and without thinking, Ethan spun around. There, standing just a few feet away, was the alien woman once more. This time, she was closer, almost too close for comfort. Ethan could see the sharp details of her features, her pointed ears, her piercing eyes, and the way her body seemed to blend into the swamp like it was part of the landscape. She was graceful, yet powerful, like something that didn't belong in the human world. Ethan took a step back, unsure of what to do. The last time she had appeared, she had simply watched him. But this time, there was a sense of tension in the air. She didn't speak, didn't move, but he could feel her presence pressing down on him. He swallowed hard, and for the first time, spoke out loud. "Who are you?" His voice was louder than he intended, the sound bouncing off the trees and swamp water. She didn't respond. Instead, she slowly walked toward him, each step measured, deliberate. Ethan could feel his pulse quicken, his hands growing clammy. The feeling of being watched, of being studied, grew stronger with every step she took. She was calculating, like a hunter closing in on its prey. Ethan's mind raced. Was she an enemy? A creature guarding this swamp from intruders? Or was there more to her than he could understand? He was a trained explorer, accustomed to strange worlds and new species, but this was different. This was personal, and he wasn't sure if he could handle it. The moment felt endless, but in the span of a few seconds, he realized he had to do something. He couldn't just stand there, waiting for her to make the first move. He gathered his courage, meeting her gaze head-on. "I'm not here to harm you," he said, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "I'm just here to learn, to explore." The woman stopped, just a few feet away now, her eyes narrowing as she studied him intently. Her gaze didn't soften, but there was no immediate threat in her posture. It was like she was considering his words, weighing them carefully. Ethan took another cautious step back, not sure whether he should trust her or not. "I don't want trouble. I just need to know what's going on here. What this place is." For a long moment, the alien woman remained silent, her gaze never leaving him. Then, without warning, she moved in a blur of motion. Faster than he could react, she had crossed the distance between them, placing herself directly in his path, blocking his escape. Ethan's breath hitched, panic rising in his chest. She wasn't just watching him anymore. She was preventing him from leaving. "What do you want from me?" he demanded, his voice shaky. The woman tilted her head slightly, as if pondering the question. Then, in a quiet voice, so soft it was almost a whisper, she spoke, her words broken, halting, as though she wasn't used to human language. "Stay." The word came out slowly, uncertainly, as if she were testing it. Ethan blinked, surprised. "Stay." What did she mean by that? "Stay," he repeated, his voice flat. "Stay here, in this swamp." She nodded once, her eyes gleaming with a mix of intent and something else he couldn't quite place, something primal. Ethan shook his head, stepping back. "I can't stay here. I have to return to my people. My mission. It's important." The woman didn't seem to care about his mission. She simply moved closer, her body language conveying that she wasn't going to let him go that easily. "I don't think you understand," Ethan said, trying to reason with her. "I'm not like you. I can't just stay here in this swamp. There's more to see out there." Her eyes flashed briefly, and then she moved even closer, her face inches from his. The warmth of her breath brushed against his skin, sending a shiver down his spine. The scent of the swamp lingered on her, earthy, wild, untamed. For a moment, it felt like time stood still. The alien woman, towering over him, had the power to keep him there, and she wasn't going to let him leave without a fight. Ethan's mind raced, thinking of a way to escape, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to win this confrontation by force. The swamp was hers to command, and she wasn't going to let him go. The night in the swamp was colder than Ethan expected. The mist had thickened, wrapping the world in a ghostly embrace. The alien woman still stood before him, her intense eyes watching him carefully. He had no idea what she wanted, but it was clear that she was not going to let him leave the swamp without a reason. Her calm yet determined presence made him feel like there was no way out. After what felt like an eternity of standing in silence, Ethan spoke again. "I don't know why you're doing this," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But I'm not here to harm you or anyone else. I just need to find my way back." The woman said nothing in response, but her eyes softened slightly, as if considering his words. Still, she remained standing in his way, making it clear that she wasn't going to let him leave. Ethan was getting frustrated, but he knew he couldn't force her to move. She was stronger and faster than he could ever hope to be in the swamp. Trying to keep calm, Ethan decided to observe her more closely. He had to understand her better if he was going to get out of this alive. She wasn't like any creature he'd ever seen before. There was a raw power in her, a grace that was impossible to ignore. Despite her fierce appearance, there was something almost noble about her. Her posture was regal, as if she belonged to the swamp, as if she were its guardian. Ethan took a slow step back, his eyes never leaving her. He wasn't sure what to do next. Should he try again to reason with her, or should he prepare to make a run for it? But as soon as he moved, the woman's eyes locked onto his. Her gaze was sharp, like a hawk watching its prey. She wasn't going to let him go anywhere, and he knew it. Then, unexpectedly, she stepped aside, leaving a narrow path in front of her. It was the first sign of movement that seemed to suggest she wasn't entirely set on keeping him there by force. Confused but cautiously optimistic, Ethan took a tentative step forward, his eyes flicking between the woman and the path she had cleared. "I don't know what you want from me," he said again, his voice quieter this time, as if to show that he was willing to cooperate. "But if you want me to stay, you have to tell me why. I need to understand." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The sounds of the swamp, once so loud, seemed to disappear, leaving only the eerie stillness between them. Ethan felt his heart beat faster. Something was changing. Something about the situation felt different now. The woman took a step closer to him, and this time, Ethan didn't flinch. He stood his ground, though his mind was racing with questions. Was she about to hurt him, or was she finally going to speak? To his surprise, she didn't speak at all. Instead, she moved closer, reaching out with a long, graceful arm. Ethan's heart skipped a beat as she touched his arm gently. Her fingers were cool but firm, and as soon as they made contact, he felt an unexpected warmth flood through him, as if her touch carried some sort of energy he couldn't explain. He stared at her, unsure of what to make of this moment. Her touch was not what he expected. It wasn't aggressive or harsh. It was more like a quiet gesture, a way of trying to communicate. The warmth spreading through him felt different, too, comforting yet unfamiliar, as if she was offering him something deeper than just a way to escape. After a long pause, she let go of his arm, and with a steady, deliberate movement, she pointed to the swamp around them. Her eyes followed the direction of her finger, then returned to him. Ethan could see something in her gaze, a pleading, almost desperate look. It wasn't anger or suspicion this time. It was a silent request for understanding. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He didn't know what to make of it, but one thing was clear. This wasn't a simple threat or warning anymore. The alien woman was trying to communicate something important to him, and it wasn't through words. It was through actions, through the unspoken connection between them. "I don't understand," Ethan said again, his voice softer now. "What are you trying to tell me?" The woman didn't answer with words, but instead turned and began walking into the depths of the swamp, her movements fluid and effortless. Ethan hesitated for only a moment before following her, unsure of what he was about to find. He had come here to uncover the truth about the swamp, and now it seemed the truth was coming to him in a way he hadn't anticipated. The woman led him deeper into the swamp, her pace slow enough to give him a chance to keep up. As they walked, Ethan noticed the swamp around them seemed to change. The trees grew taller, the ground firmer, and the air felt warmer, less oppressive. It was almost as if they were entering a different part of the swamp, one that was more alive, more connected. After what felt like hours of walking in silence, they arrived at a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a small, calm pool of water, its surface reflecting the pale light of the moon. The alien woman stopped at the edge of the pool, turning to face Ethan. Her eyes were calm now, her posture more relaxed, but there was a sense of urgency in the air. Ethan looked around, his confusion growing. Why had she brought him here? What did this place mean to her? She pointed to the water, then back at him. There was a glimmer of understanding in her eyes now, a silent invitation for him to get closer. As he moved closer to the pool, he realized that the water wasn't like anything he'd ever seen before. It shimmered with a strange, otherworldly glow, and as he bent down to look, he felt a connection to it, a pull almost magnetic. The alien woman stood quietly behind him, watching as he studied the pool. For the first time, Ethan felt like he was starting to understand. This swamp, this woman, they were connected to something deeper, something more powerful than he had realized. He looked back at her, meeting her gaze. "You want me to understand this swamp," he said, more to himself than to her. "You're not just protecting it. You're trying to show me something." The woman nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. Ethan stood there for a moment, the weight of the situation settling over him. The bond between them, though strange and unspoken, was undeniable. He had come here looking for answers, but now it seemed like he was beginning to find them, not in the things he had expected, but in the silent understanding between him and the alien woman. The cool, damp air surrounded Ethan as he stood by the shimmering pool, the mysterious glow reflecting in his eyes. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to feel, but something in the air had changed since he had arrived at the clearing. The alien woman, who had been an unknown force, a guardian, and even a mystery in his mind, now seemed like a guide, leading him to a truth he wasn't sure he was ready for. Ethan turned away from the glowing water and faced the woman, who stood silently behind him, her intense gaze fixed on him. There was no fear or hostility in her eyes anymore. Instead, there was something else, something more like trust, or maybe hope. He had seen that same expression on the faces of those who had something important to protect. "You want me to understand this swamp," Ethan said quietly, more to himself than to her. "But why? Why are you so determined to stop me from leaving? What is this place?" The woman stepped forward, closer to the pool, and then extended a hand toward it. Her fingers brushed the surface of the water, and for a moment, the glow intensified, swirling in ripples. Ethan watched in awe, not knowing if this was some kind of magic or natural phenomenon. But it was beautiful. It was as if the water itself was alive, responding to her touch, responding to something deeper. She didn't speak, but instead turned to look at Ethan, her expression unreadable. He could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a strange creature trying to keep him trapped in a swamp. This was something much older, much more powerful than he could have imagined. The air between them seemed to thrum with an unspoken connection, one that tied him to the swamp, to her, in a way he couldn't quite understand. With a deep breath, Ethan stepped closer to the pool, kneeling beside it. He could feel the energy emanating from the water, something that felt both ancient and alive. There was a sense of power here, a force that connected everything. The trees, the plants, the swamp itself. Everything in this place seemed to be part of a larger whole. He glanced at the woman again, realizing that she wasn't just a protector of the swamp. She was part of it. This place was her home, and she was bound to it in a way that Ethan couldn't yet grasp. "You're not just protecting the swamp," Ethan murmured. "You're connected to it, aren't you?" The woman nodded slowly, her eyes still locked on him. She stepped back, leaving him to observe the pool, the quiet energy that radiated from it. The swamp wasn't just a place. It was alive. It was more than just a habitat. It was the source of something vital. And now, it seemed, Ethan was being shown a secret, a hidden truth that had been kept from him. The woman's next movement was unexpected. She reached out and touched his shoulder, lightly but with purpose. There was no fear in her touch, no threat, just a calm, solid presence. It felt almost as if she was asking him to understand, to see beyond the surface, to look deeper. "Tell me what's happening here," Ethan said again, his voice a little more urgent this time. He was ready for the answers, ready to understand what was so important that it kept him from leaving. She didn't respond with words, but instead gestured to the pool again, as if urging him to look closer. Ethan's curiosity was piqued. He leaned in, gazing at the water's glowing surface, unsure of what he would see. For a moment, it seemed to reflect his own face, but then the image shifted, swirling like a dream. The reflections in the water became more vivid, flashes of images, scenes from the past. He saw what appeared to be the woman in the distance, standing near the edge of the pool, but this time she was not alone. There were others with her, other creatures like her, their forms larger and more imposing, yet their faces were peaceful. They looked as though they were part of the land itself, connected to the swamp in a way that Ethan could not comprehend. As the images continued, Ethan saw the landscape shift. The swamp was not always as it was now. There were vast plains, thick forests, and towering mountains, an entire world that had once thrived in balance, a world that now seemed to have faded away. In one of the images, he saw a group of alien creatures, different from the woman, arriving, their ships dark and ominous, their technology advanced but alien. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The swamp had once been part of something much greater. It had been a thriving ecosystem, connected to a whole civilization. And then something had happened, something that had changed everything. The woman, or whatever she was, seemed to be the last protector of this place, the last of her kind, to guard its secret. The alien woman stepped forward again, breaking his trance. She watched him closely, waiting for him to process what he had seen. He could see the sadness in her eyes now, the burden she carried. She had been alone for a long time, guarding this forgotten world, perhaps the last of her kind to remain in the swamp. "I understand," Ethan whispered, his mind racing with the implications of what he had seen. This swamp wasn't just a place. It was the heart of an entire lost civilization. And she, the alien woman, was its last protector. The weight of the situation hit him. The swamp wasn't just alive, it was dying. The balance had been disturbed by the arrival of outsiders, by forces beyond her control. And now she had no one left but him. He turned to face her fully, his voice stronger now. "You've been protecting this place for a long time, haven't you? You're the last of your kind, the last connection to what this swamp used to be." She nodded, her gaze never leaving his. Ethan realized that she wasn't just asking for help. She was reaching out, trusting him to understand the importance of what was at stake. "I can't leave," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I'll help you. I'll do whatever I can to protect this place." The alien woman's eyes softened, the faintest trace of gratitude in her expression. She had been alone, guarding a secret for so long, and now finally she wasn't alone anymore. Ethan felt a sense of purpose settle in his chest. This swamp, this living world, was more than just a place to explore. It was something worth protecting. And now he had a role to play in its future. Ethan stood at the edge of the shimmering pool, his mind racing with the newfound knowledge. He had come to this swamp searching for answers, but what he had discovered was far more than he could have expected. The swamp wasn't just an isolated piece of land. It was a remnant of a lost civilization, a place that had once been alive with life and wonder. And now, this strange alien woman was its guardian, the last of her kind, protecting it from forces that seemed beyond both their control. The more he thought about it, the more Ethan realized how much responsibility he had taken on. He had agreed to help the woman, but he wasn't entirely sure how he could. What could a single human do against whatever had caused the swamp's downfall? How could he protect something so ancient, so connected to the land itself? As he glanced back at the alien woman, who stood a little ways behind him, her expression unreadable, he couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play here. She was not just protecting the swamp. She was tied to it, as much a part of it as the trees and the water. She had been living here alone for so long, and now she had put her trust in him. He couldn't let her down. But as the days went on, the tension between them grew. It wasn't that they argued or fought, but the weight of the situation hung in the air. The swamp was not just a home to her. It was a living thing, a creature in its own right. And Ethan could feel the pull of it, as if the swamp itself were testing him, asking him to prove his loyalty. Ethan spent his days exploring the swamp with the woman by his side, learning more about the place, its hidden secrets, and the delicate balance that had once existed here. He had seen the ancient visions in the water, but it wasn't enough. He needed more answers. What had caused the downfall? Why had the creatures of the swamp disappeared? And what was the real danger threatening the swamp now? One evening, as they walked along the water's edge, Ethan noticed that the woman seemed more agitated than usual. Her movements were quick, restless, and she kept glancing over her shoulder, as though she were expecting something or someone. "Is something wrong?" Ethan asked, noticing the change in her behavior. She stopped, turning to face him, her eyes serious. "The swamp is not safe anymore," she said, her voice low and urgent. "There are things here now, things that should not be." Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. What kind of things? The woman didn't answer right away. She seemed to be listening to something, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the dense trees around them. Finally, she spoke again, her voice tense. "Outsiders," she said simply. "They come to take, to destroy. They do not understand what they are doing." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had heard rumors of other explorers coming to this part of the galaxy, searching for valuable resources, but he hadn't expected them to be here, this close to the swamp. The idea of outsiders invading the very heart of this place, this living world, sent a wave of unease through him. "How many are there?" Ethan asked, his voice low. The woman's eyes flashed, her expression fierce. "Too many." Ethan felt a surge of determination. He couldn't let this happen. He had already agreed to help protect the swamp. And now, the threat was real. He had to do something. "I'll help you," he said firmly. "Whatever it takes." The woman looked at him, her eyes softening just slightly. "You do not understand," she said, shaking her head. "You cannot fight them the way I can." Ethan clenched his fists. "I might not have the strength you do, but I won't stand by and do nothing. I'll find a way." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Finally, he nodded, though her expression remained uncertain. "Then we will see." As the days passed, the tension between them continued to grow. Ethan spent more and more time patrolling the swamp with the woman, trying to find any sign of the outsiders she had warned him about. There were times when the silence between them felt heavy, as if they both knew that something was coming, something neither of them was fully prepared for. And yet, despite the growing danger, there was also a strange bond forming between them. Ethan had begun to understand her better, not just her role as a protector, but who she was, deep down. She wasn't just an alien Beastwoman, guarding a swamp for no reason. She was a survivor, a creature of this land who had lived through things Ethan couldn't even imagine. One night, after another long day of searching the swamp, they returned to the clearing near the pool. Ethan was exhausted, his body aching from the constant vigilance, but he couldn't ignore the quiet pull he felt toward the woman. She had been his guide, his protector, and now they were partners in this fight, even if the future was uncertain. As they sat near the edge of the pool, the glow of the water casting a soft light over the two of them, Ethan couldn't help but feel that something had changed. The air between them was no longer just tense with the weight of the situation. It had shifted, becoming something deeper, more personal. The woman sat beside him, her posture relaxed for the first time in days. She turned to him, her eyes meeting his, and for a moment, they simply stared at each other. "You're not like the others," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You could have left at any time, but you stayed." Ethan nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I couldn't leave you to face this alone." For a brief moment, the woman seemed to relax, the fierce look in her eyes softening. But then, just as quickly, it was gone. She stood up, her movements sharp again, and Ethan followed her gaze as she looked out into the dark swamp. "They are coming," she said quietly, "and we must be ready." The air in the swamp had grown heavy with anticipation. Ethan could feel the tension thickening around him, as though the very land was holding its breath. Every rustle in the trees, every snap of a branch underfoot, made his senses flare. The woman had been right. There was something out there, something dangerous, and it was getting closer with every passing day. For days now, they had been preparing, patrolling the swamp's edges, checking the paths, looking for any sign of the outsiders that threatened to destroy everything. The woman had been more vigilant than ever, her movements swift and precise, her eyes sharp as they scanned the misty depths of the swamp. Ethan did his best to keep up, but it was clear that she knew this place far better than he ever would. She was part of it. "Stay close," she warned him one evening as they trekked through the dense underbrush. Her voice was tense, barely a whisper above the sounds of the swamp. Ethan nodded, tightening his grip on the makeshift spear he had fashioned out of a long branch. The alien woman moved ahead of him, her steps barely making a sound. She was like a shadow, a presence in the night, always watching, always listening. He, on the other hand, felt exposed, every crack in the undergrowth echoing in the silence. They moved deeper into the swamp, and soon Ethan noticed something strange. The air had changed. It was colder, heavier. He glanced up at the woman, who had stopped and was staring intently ahead. "What's wrong?" he whispered. "Something is near," she said, her voice low, filled with urgency. "I can feel it." Ethan's heart began to race. He strained his ears, trying to listen for any sounds that might indicate an approaching threat, but all he could hear was the rustling of leaves in the wind. Still, there was something intangible in the air that set his nerves on edge. The woman turned back toward him, her face serious. "We need to move quickly." Without waiting for his response, she started moving again, faster this time. Ethan had no choice but to follow, his feet slipping on the wet ground as he struggled to keep up. They moved through the swamp with purpose, making their way toward the heart of the marsh, where the water was deeper and the trees grew taller. It wasn't long before they arrived at a clearing that Ethan hadn't seen before. The trees parted to reveal a large, dark pool, its surface smooth and still, reflecting the sky above. The area around the pool was quiet, too quiet. Ethan could feel the presence of something lurking just out of sight, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. The woman stopped at the edge of the pool, her eyes scanning his surroundings. She seemed to be waiting, listening for something. The minutes stretched on, the tension thick in the air. Ethan took a cautious step forward. "What are we waiting for?" "We are not alone," the woman replied, her voice low. She motioned toward the water, her fingers brushing the surface. The pool's stillness seemed to shimmer in response to her touch, as though it were alive. Just as Ethan opened his mouth to ask another question, he heard it, a distant, low hum. It wasn't a natural sound, not from the swamp. It was mechanical, rhythmic, like the sound of engines powering up. The woman's eyes widened. "They are coming," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The outsiders." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The hum grew louder, closer. And then, through the trees, he saw them. A group of figures appeared in the distance, moving quickly through the swamp. They were wearing dark suits, their faces obscured by helmets. They didn't look like ordinary explorers. These were soldiers, mercenaries perhaps, with advanced technology and weapons strapped to their backs. Ethan's stomach sank. This was it. The danger the woman had been warning him about had finally arrived. He looked at the woman, who was now standing tall, her posture stiff with determination. She was ready for whatever was about to happen, but Ethan wasn't sure if he was. He had never been in a real fight before, and now he was standing in the middle of a war zone. A war zone he didn't understand. "Stay behind me," the woman ordered, her voice firm. Ethan barely had time to react before she was moving, her body sleek and powerful, darting toward the approaching group with the speed of a predator. He watched in awe as she moved through the swamp like she was one with it, her every step fluid and purposeful. Ethan hesitated for a moment, but then his instincts kicked in. He couldn't just stand there. He had promised to help her. He had to act. He ran after her, the damp earth making his steps heavy, but the drive to protect this place, this woman, pushed him forward. He didn't know how he would fight or what he would do, but he couldn't let these invaders destroy everything. Not after everything he had learned. The woman reached the edge of the group first, her movements lightning fast as she launched herself at the nearest soldier. The soldier didn't even have time to react before she knocked him to the ground, her strength overwhelming. She was like a force of nature, unstoppable. Ethan watched in shock as she fought. The soldiers were no match for her speed and power, but they didn't back down. They retaliated, raising their weapons, firing blasts that lit up the night. The woman dodged the blasts with ease, her body moving in a way that seemed almost unnatural. Ethan dove for cover behind a large rock, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea how to help her. He couldn't just stand there, but he wasn't sure what he could do. Suddenly, one of the soldiers aimed directly at the woman, and for a split second, it seemed like she might be hit. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed a nearby branch and hurled it toward the soldier, knocking his aim off. The blast missed, and the soldier turned toward him, eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't have interfered," the soldier growled, stepping toward him. Ethan's mind raced. This wasn't just about protecting the swamp anymore. It was about protecting the woman, about standing up for something bigger than himself. As the soldier took another step toward him, Ethan raised his spear, ready to fight. He wasn't sure if he could win, but he wasn't going to back down. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he stood face to face with the mercenary, the soldier's weapon aimed directly at him. His hands gripped the spear tightly, the weight of it grounding him as the seconds stretched on in tense silence. The mercenary's eyes were filled with anger, but there was something else, something more cold and calculating. Ethan didn't know how to fight, but he couldn't back down. Not now. Behind him, the alien woman was still engaged in battle with the other soldiers, her movements swift and precise. Each time one of the mercenaries tried to strike, she would dodge or counter with a strength and speed that Ethan couldn't even comprehend. She was like a force of nature, and he had to trust her. He just had to find a way to help. The soldier in front of him sneered. "You should have stayed out of this, human," he growled, raising his weapon once more. The air crackled with the threat of a blast. Ethan didn't have much time. His instincts told him to move, to do something, anything. Without thinking, he threw the spear with everything he had, aiming at the soldier's weapon. The metal shaft hit its mark, knocking the weapon from the soldier's hands and sending it skidding across the swampy ground. The soldier growled in frustration, but before he could make a move, Ethan lunged forward, tackling him to the ground. The soldier struggled beneath him, but Ethan held firm, using the element of surprise. It wasn't graceful or well-trained. It was pure instinct. Ethan's hands found the soldier's weapon, and in a desperate move, he shoved it toward the soldier's chest, pinning him down. "I'm not letting you destroy this place," Ethan said, his voice filled with determination. He could feel the power of his words, his commitment to protecting the swamp and everything in it. For the first time since he arrived, Ethan felt like he was truly part of something important. The soldier struggled for a moment longer before he stopped moving, defeated by the sheer force of Ethan's resolve. Ethan stood up, breathing heavily, his heart racing as he looked over at the alien woman. She was still fighting, but it seemed like she had gained the upper hand. The remaining soldiers were retreating, realizing that they were outmatched. The alien woman moved toward Ethan, her eyes scanning the area for any more threats. She was silent, but there was a quiet gratitude in the way she looked at him. She had done most of the work, but Ethan had helped. Together, they had defended the swamp. As the last soldier fled into the misty darkness, the woman turned toward Ethan. She said nothing, but her gaze spoke volumes. Ethan could see the weight of everything she had carried alone for so long. She had been protecting the swamp, fighting for its survival, and now, with his help, they had finally pushed back the invaders. For a moment, they stood in silence, the battle finally over. The swamp, though scared, was still alive. Ethan could feel the pulse of it beneath his feet, the hum of something ancient and powerful, still thriving despite everything. The alien woman took a step closer to him, her eyes softening. "Thank you," she said, her voice low and sincere. Ethan nodded, feeling a rush of relief. "I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. I had to help." She looked at him for a long moment, as if studying him. The intensity of her gaze made Ethan feel like she was seeing straight through him. "You have proven yourself," she said quietly. "You are not like the others. You understand what this place means." Ethan swallowed, still processing everything that had happened. He had come here looking for answers, for a mission. But he had found so much more. He had found a connection to something deep and ancient, something worth protecting. And in doing so, he had found himself, someone who was willing to fight for something greater than his own survival. "I'm not leaving," he said suddenly, his words coming out before he had a chance to think about them. "I'll stay. I'll help you protect this place. Whatever it takes." The woman's eyes softened, the fierce edge of her warrior spirit melting into something gentler. She nodded once, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "You are welcome here," she said, her voice filled with quiet resolve. "Together, we will protect the swamp. Together, we will keep it alive." Ethan looked around at the swamp, at the lush green trees, and the sparkling waters that shimmered under the moonlight. There was still so much to learn, so much to understand. But now he knew that he had a purpose here. He wasn't just an outsider anymore. He was part of this world, part of the fight to protect it. The alien woman stepped closer to him, her presence calming the storm of thoughts in his mind. For the first time, he realized how much he had come to rely on her, how much he had come to trust her. She wasn't just a protector. She was a partner, someone who had fought alone for too long and now had someone to stand beside her. As they stood together in the clearing, Ethan felt a sense of peace settle over him. The fight wasn't over. There would be more challenges ahead, more dangers to face. But for now, the swamp was safe. The woman was safe. And for the first time since he had arrived, Ethan felt like he had truly found a place where he belonged. The alien woman turned toward the pool once more, her hand hovering above the water, as if feeling the pulse of the swamp beneath her fingertips. Ethan joined her, standing beside her in silence, both of them watching the water's surface shimmer in the moonlight. And in that moment, Ethan understood. He wasn't just here to explore anymore. He was here to protect. And with the alien woman by his side, he knew he would do everything in his power to keep the swamp alive.